Here's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, the host of Rinkwide Vancouver. It was a busy weekend for him. How are you, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm thinking that some of those Canucks top-end players should be well rested for this back-to-back set against Montreal and Calgary. Don't expend your energy on a Sunday. Save it for Tuesday and Wednesday nights.
So is that your big takeaway from the weekend, Jeff, the deployment of their better offensive players in the Dallas game? Or is there something
I
else?
think there's a couple. I mean, if we're recapping the weekend, I'm still sort of buzzing about the one-timer that I saw on Friday. I was there in person. I saw it. It's there. It's still in the arsenal. But yeah, for a follow-up, pretty disappointing for both Elias Paterson and for his hockey club. But Rick Tocchet, awfully animated, as I'm sure you guys have already discussed. Message sending, Game 63. Time is ticking towards the end of the line here, and you can just feel the frustration of the head coach. I mean, it's a 1-1 game with 30 seconds to go in the second period. Just get it to the third and take your chances. It's still the Dallas Stars, and they're playing back-to-back, and they've got a lot of top-end talent, but that had to be frustrating. Just a bunch of little breakdowns that lead to a big goal for the Dallas Stars. Paterson loses a face-off. Lankinen throws the rebound right onto the stick of Granlund. Forbort and Myers basically both go to Rantanen in front of the net, leaving Granlund wide open. And so it's just disappointing that I didn't think effort was terrible. Again, they're in a 1-1 tie late into the second period against one of the top teams, the best team in the NHL since Christmas. But the minute Dallas gets up 2-1, we just know how steep the mountain is for this hockey club.
Well, and coach didn't hate the effort either against the Dallas Stars, and it leaves us to ask, Jeff, are there enough goals in this team to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Yeah, it's starting to become a totally legitimate question. When you're leaning on Derek Forbort to provide your only boost, his first goal in 2+ years.
And a beauty. And
it came at the result of a good shift. There was a lot to like in that moment. Yeah. But guys, if you look at who scored the goals here recently, Carson Soucy with 1 foot out the door. Teddy Bluger, who hadn't scored since before Christmas, is all of a sudden the hottest guy on this team. He's got 2, but one of them's an empty netter. And then you get Derek Forbort, who just isn't looked to score goals. And so on and on it goes. It's just unbelievable how little they generate. And so I guess the idea is, from Rick Tocchet's standpoint, Paterson and DeBrusk and Boeser, they weren't going. They weren't. And there were some defensive miscues as well. All added up to Rick Tocchet saying, you got to earn your ice time. I suppose the hope in his mind is that, all right, they probably weren't going to beat the Dallas Stars, but if I can get to these guys and get them better, Montreal is a gettable game, and then obviously the game on Wednesday in Calgary could very well be their season. I mean, there's enough runway that if they lose that game to the Flames, they're not out of it, but that becomes a significant hockey game. And it's the back end of back-to-backs. By the way, the Flames have been idle since Saturday and don't play until that game on Wednesday, so schedule certainly working in Calgary's favor there. And, yeah, I mean, I'm starting to get a little concerned about Brock Boeser, quite frankly. All the noise around him and all the chatter, and we talked about him a lot leading into the deadline and the fact that he made it through the deadline, but 8 games now since the Four Nations without a goal and just hasn't looked dangerous and clearly missing JT Miller. But guess what? JT's not here. And so for Brock, this does become a matter of dollars and cents. He maybe didn't like the offer that the Canucks had put on the table, and we'll see how this all plays out. But if he really struggles down the stretch here, and what's that going to do for his bargaining power, for his earning power as an unrestricted free agent? We always say, a guy with a 40-goal season on his resume, he's going to get paid, and he will. But I do wonder if he fizzles out down the stretch here, what does that do to potential suitors? Are there some teams that maybe step back? We know that the offers weren't particularly strong for him at the trade deadline, and I still think that was more about the asking price than the player itself. But literally millions of dollars on the line for Brock Boeser here over these final 19 games.
Wouldn't that be amazing if they kind of backed into a better negotiating position in all this because he happens to stink down the stretch?
You might as well wait now. If you're Alvin and Rutherford, there's no sense trying to get him on the dotted line now. See how the rest of this season goes before you commit anything.
Tocchet keeps talking about work rate for all these guys, Boeser included. Is he unwittingly throwing himself under the bus? Like, at what point is the work rate of the player? Like, you hope that it's innate. You hope that it's just in the gut of the player to give it 100% every time out there. But at this point, when it's so repetitive and he keeps on saying it, at what point is it on the coach to try to get it out of the player?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at that point, and maybe have been for a little while here, chicken and egg, about is it the system or is it the players? I still maintain that these are better players than they are showing. And I think I'll die on that hill. And I get that there is angst in the marketplace. And we've said it's going to be tough. If they flame out and don't make the playoffs, it is going to be difficult to sell this group to this fan base next season. Oh, and at a 20% uptick in prices, by the way. And so there's going to be some really big, pivotal organizational decisions, I think, that have to be made, and the future of the head coach is a part of that. But there is 19 games. There are 19 games remaining here. And, you know, they're in a mud puddle with Calgary doesn't score much and doesn't win at a rate any greater than the Vancouver Canucks. St. Louis kind of does its thing and scuffles along, and Utah as well. But, you know, this is a big week, obviously. Calgary on Wednesday, Utah on Sunday. So by the time we do this next Monday, you know, if the Canucks are able to put it all together and put a little distance between some of those teams, you'll be feeling better about their chances of making the playoffs. But, yeah, I mean, look, Rick Tocchet's a defense-first coach. We know that, right? That much is evidently clear. And Patrick Allvin said on Friday at his press conference, our plan is to try to win these games 2-1. That's great until your opponent gets 2, and all of a sudden your plan's out the window. And this idea of now all of a sudden scoring 2 yourself, or dare I say 3, to win a game in regulation, it just becomes a monumental ask. And, you know, go down the line, guys. Like, all the heat's on Elias Paterson for understandable reasons given his price point. Brock Boeser has been the focus here of late. Jake DeBrusk has been pretty consistent and leads the team with 22 goals, but most of his productions come on the power play. I think he has 2 5-on-5 goals since Christmas. You know, most of the game is still played 5-on-5. Like, you want power play production, but ultimately the game is played 5-on-5. And even a player like Philip Hedl, you trade JT Miller, the talk was more opportunity, increased role here, look out, he's going to spread his wings, scored in his debut. He has 1 goal in 11 games since then. And yes, his speed is noticeable, but that has to translate. And so you come back to sort of what I talked about earlier. Like, right now, who do you look to thinking that's your guy that is going to produce the offense necessary to get this team over the hump? And, you know, part of the problem here, too, guys, is 0-5 now against Dallas, Vegas, and Winnipeg. And 5 of the remaining 19 games are against those 3 top teams. So, you know, a quarter of the games left in the schedule are against those teams. And in 4 of the 5 games that they've played, they've been held to 1 goal. Like, they just cannot generate offense against good teams. They struggle to generate offense against subpar teams. And so this idea of, you know, do they have enough in their holster to get to the playoffs? I need to see it, quite frankly, because as I sit here right now and having watched since the Four Nations and since they traded JT Miller, you have a tough time convincing me that there is enough offense there to get them where they want to go.
And that's honestly, and I said it in the first block, Jeff, why I think we heard what we heard from this coach last night with regards to Paterson, Boeser, and to a lesser degree, DeBrusk. I just don't think he draws a big distinction right now in terms of offensive capabilities between those 3 guys and guys like Drew O'Connor and Jonathan Lacramacki and some of the other guys who we may look at and say are, you know, too young or more pluggers or this, that. I just think he draws a lot of distinction right now.
Pedigree doesn't matter.
In terms of who's going to help him offensively between the guys who are supposed to and paid like it and the guys who don't necessarily have that NHL profile.
And I think in this market, we all understand that Quinn Hughes is out of the lineup and has missed 13 games. And obviously, they're better when he's in there. But there's still this massive disconnect for me that Quinn Hughes was having this repeat Norris season on the fringes maybe of the Hart conversation, or maybe not even on the fringes, in the Hart conversation. And how does Quinn Hughes produce the way that he has under this coach and in this system? And it hasn't rubbed off on a single forward. So this idea that, oh, they're going to get Quinn back at some point, look out, that's when they're going to start cooking with gas, I'm not so sure. Quinn makes them better. You'd think he'd make their power play better, although the power play's been all right in his absence. But I still, and I cover this team, I'm there every single day, and I can't figure out how Quinn Hughes can get to 60 points and not a single forward is at 40. Like, if I was a forward on this team, I'd just pass Quinn the puck and say, get me some points, man. Like, help my stats, help me pad my stats. But it's a massive disconnect that even moving forward, they've got to figure out, like, how do you get peak Quinn Hughes, but how do you get Quinn Hughes to drag these other guys along with him so that their offensive totals are a little more robust than they have been this season?
He's an assist per game, Quinn Hughes, and yet you're right. It's like, is he assisting on goals that aren't being credited to people? Like, where are those goals?
2 assists on most goals, right? Like,
it's like the goal scorer evaporates, does not get credit, although the assist stays on the ground. It's truly unbelievable. At this point, we're all guessing. I mean, Quinn Hughes is not playing these back-to-backs midweek. Do we just assume that based on the way he was practicing the last week?
Yeah, I watched him on Friday morning ahead of the trade deadline, ahead of the morning skate, and he was out there for about 20 minutes with Jason Krogh, the skills coach. Didn't shoot pucks at all. Basically, whatever puck handling he did was on his backhand, a couple of saucer passes, but was not shooting pucks. And, that was a huge red flag to me. Took Saturday off. They said that was a scheduled day off. Apparently skated with Thatcher Demko on Sunday. And now it's another team day off, and then you get into these back-to-backs. And this is part of the problem, too, with this compressed schedule coming out of the Four Nations break is not only a lot of games stacked, but very little practice time. And so you think, I mean, we've seen Quinn get injected back into the lineup, but for Thatcher Demko, time is ticking now with 19 games to go. By this time next week, they're now to 15 games and not much practice time. And Rick Tocchet has said, that's the next step in the progression is to get a few practices in. So I think your guess is as good as mine on Demko. I do think that Hughes is closer. I think we're going to see Quinn Hughes again, hopefully sooner rather than later. Like, that game last night could have used Quinn Hughes and Miro Heiskanen all day, every day, just to up the entertainment factor. But, yeah, like how effective Quinn will be, and, there's enough messaging now coming out of the organization that he's not going to be fully healthy. Like, even if we see him again, we know that this is something that he's battling through. And so can he be the difference maker? Can he get to the apex of his powers? That seems like a stretch as well. But yeah, I mean, as we sit here on Monday, thinking that he's going to play either of these games, Tuesday or Wednesday, feels like a long shot to me.
We won't call this reporting, but have you heard any good working theories on what's injured if he's not taking shots? Like we don't think it's an appendage, like a wrist or hand or something, do we? We seem to think it's more
I
core.
think they've said it's a different injury, but related to the oblique. So
right,
I
so
think
core of some sort,
compensatory. You get back in the lineup. You're trying to protect one side. Maybe you stretch something else somewhere. It feels like in the core, and so yeah. I mean, and all of this against the backdrop of if they sneak into the playoffs, where he may as well wear a bullseye on his back because you know that teams are coming.
Tenderize him.
Yeah.
Well, and the stat you had about their record against the teams they're most likely to face in the first round of the playoffs. But, Hughes not being 100% all year, it just further clouds what happened or didn't happen on Friday. Like your $11.6 million center isn't going. Your Norris Trophy defenseman is playing through
limited capacity,
is out and is going to be playing through at least one, if not a couple of injuries when he gets back. Your Vezina finalist goaltender is on the shelf, and still, you've got a good number of your eggs. You've got a good number of eggs in this basket. I don't get it, Jeff. Did you see anything over the weekend by way of reporting that further informs your view and what you told us Friday about the Seinfeldian deadline about nothing?
Yeah, not really. I know Elliot Friedman talked about the Canucks and their demand for a first rounder on the headlines on Hockey Night. It sounds like if they were talking to a team like Carolina, that it sounded like it may be more of an expanded deal where Carolina was willing to part with a first, but they wanted Boeser and a piece back in return. And, they were trying to broaden it a little bit rather than just ponying up a first rounder for Brock Boeser, who obviously made it through the deadline. We heard what Patrick Allvin had to say. And so, yeah, this team marches forward now. look, Dallas was always going to be in a snarly mood, lost to Edmonton on Saturday night, but they are the Dallas Stars, and even without Rope Hintz, still a ton of depth and top-end talent now with Rand. Like, guys, how easy did that Jason Robertson goal look in transition? Right? I mean, we've spent a good deal here talking about how difficult it is for the Canucks to generate offense. Dakota Joshua turns the puck over, and the Stars go back, and they just made it look so damn easy to score off the rush. And so, that has to add to the frustration of Rick Tocchet. He's sitting there behind the bench watching that as well and thinking, we've got guys with some puck skill out there, and yet we can't get beyond the blue line, and Stars turn it back and stretch the lead. Now, 3-1. I mean, that game was essentially over. So.
Yes, it was. Boeser and the A. Do we know what's going on there?
No, I was hoping somebody was going to ask post-game. Rick obviously wasn't in a chatty mood, but I still hoped that question was going to come up because, of mixed minds. It's a letter on a jersey. Big picture, they didn't lose to the Dallas Stars because Brock Boeser didn't have an A. But it's curious at the very least that this is this long-serving, good, loyal employee. You've kind of put the knife in and twisted it on a handful of occasions. He's just come through this weekend where it felt like you were trying to diminish his value, and then he shows up on Sunday night, and a guy that's played 12 games for the Vancouver Canucks all of a sudden is now part of the leadership group, and Brock Boeser kind of left flapping in the breeze. So, no, I mean, at some point, I'll put the question to Rick Tocchet. We'll see if it's a simple rotation or if there was some more message sending in that. But again, on the list of issues for the Vancouver Canucks, it's down there somewhere, but it's not nothing either, right? I think how you treat players and how this group moves forward, I think all of that matters. And so it was surprising to me, certainly.
Yeah.
Put me in the camp that raised eyebrows when I saw that the A had been removed.
Well, they've been above board. They've been above board in saying that the emotion of the trade deadline affected him. They said that on record. Yeah. And so then you take away the A. How do you expecting that not to have an effect on
it too? Like all that JT Miller went through earlier in the season, didn't ever lose his letter. Elias Paterson's season, they've never taken the letter off him. But it just feels like Brock is the easy target for this organization time and time again. And that's sort of my read on this one. And so, look, Marcus Paterson has been a nice addition. By all accounts, a really good guy in that locker room. But 12 games on his resume as a Vancouver Canuck, enough to get an A slapped on for a game against the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, and particularly if you're trying to get him re-signed on a player-friendly contract, that seemed like a... that just doesn't seem like the way to go. But in terms of trading players, Jeff, and had this discussion last week with a couple of people, Horvat said he didn't like the way things were handled. Brock seemingly has a gripe now. Elias doubting his injury. He asked and got Carson Soucy to waive a no trade. That after Kuzmenko and Mikheyev had to sign off too, not to mention the Tanner Pearson hand injury. Are you starting to get a little worried about this management group, which I think has fallen out of favor with the fans, but falling out of favor with agents, clients, and players here, the way they've gone about operating their business recently?
I don't know. We've asked that question a bunch of times. They still seem to be able to attract free agents. It's a lovely city, if not a little expensive, but these guys can afford it. But yeah, look, I did a Canucks Army Monday mailbag today, and one of the questions was 3+ years on the job now for this management group. Is this organization any further ahead than when they showed up? And I said, quite frankly, they've retooled the defense and they have made some strides there. They have got the cap under control. They've done some nice work with Abbotsford, and even this weekend, getting Artur Silovs down for a start on Saturday so that he's ready to go. I think he'll get the call against Montreal on Tuesday night. That's good use of the farm system. So there have been some things here, but in terms of are they any closer to a Stanley Cup now than when they started? It's hard to see that that's the case. So my answer in the column was no. They've just shifted some of the issues around. They've addressed the defense, and now it's come at the expense of anybody that can put the puck in the net up front.
All right, my friend, you've got a busy week. We'll be listening, watching Tuesday, Thursday, Montreal, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Calgary, Montreal, then Calgary, Tuesday, Wednesday, yes. And then, of course, this weekend we'll catch up on Friday, Jeff.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.